Welcome to the Lesson 1 warm-up. In this video, we'll take a look at some example photos of sunset skies, clouds, and silhouetted trees. These observations will aid us in creating the Lesson 1 assignment painting. I have some photographs here, and these are compositions that are going to be similar to what we'll be painting. It's a sunset sky with a silhouetted tree, and this will be our main reference image here. The tree we'll be painting won't look identical to this tree. We'll be doing a slightly different style, and I'll leave it up to you to decide what kind of style of tree you want to paint. But the principles will be basically the same. We'll have a branch and it will fork to smaller branches and so on. You can decide how many branches you want to add to your piece. You don't have to do 1,000 branches like in this example. There are some things that are consistent throughout all of these examples here. The first is the color palette is limited to purples and blues and reds and orange and yellow. You don't see any green here, and this is typical of a sunset. There's a silhouetted tree, which is the darkest area in the piece. The lightest area is the light source, which is visible in all of these examples. You can't see the sun, but you know that it's there because it's the lightest area. Versus this example here, you can see the sun clearly. When the sun is visible in the painting like this, it creates a radial gradient rather than a linear gradient, as you sometimes see in a daytime sky. And so you can see there's a circular kind of shape where the light is lighter near the sun, and then there's also kind of a lighter circle of yellow surrounding that, and surrounding that there's a circle of orange. And on the very outer edges here, there's a vignette being created because the light is fading away. So it has to be light in the center and dark on the outer edges to really communicate that this is a sunset. Now, besides a radial gradient of lighter and darker value, you also want there to be a radial gradient of hue. And so you can see near the light source here, it's yellow, and then as you move away, it turns to orange, and then it turns to pink, and then it turns to purple, and so on. Now, I've found when painting a sunset sky, if I just approach it by picking colors randomly and just kind of throwing them in there, that's sometimes fun because it's spontaneous, but on the other hand, it's not very logical, and I always like to paint very logically and have an order to things. So I found that for this particular kind of painting, the grisaille method worked very well. And grisaille is basically a term that painters use for creating a painting in black and white or in monochrome with the intentions of then glazing over it or tinting it using color. And the old master painters would use this a lot in their paintings, and you can use it in your digital paintings too. So it's nice to evaluate these images in black and white to get a feel for the balance and contrast and the balance and values in the piece. And in this particular example, the lightest value is of course the light source, and the darkest value is the silhouetted trees. And then in between there's this transition in gray colors. It's good to have a nice balance of contrast. You can accomplish that by making sure that your image isn't too dark or too light overall, and that there's a nice even transition between the light and dark areas. There's a very strong dark area and there's a very strong light area, and there's everything in between. You'll also notice that there's a nice balance of sharp detail and soft detail. The sharp detail would be this tree here. It stands out. The edges are very sharp and very crisp, in contrast to the background, which is very soft and kind of out of focus. There are some sharp little clouds down here that stand out. So there's a really, really good balance between the two, and you'll have to make some adjustments in your digital painting to make sure that you achieve that sort of effect. The next thing that we'll discuss are image hose brushes, which we will use a little bit here and there to help us create repeating objects. And what an image hose brush does is it spits out little pieces of artwork. You can really put into it anything you want. You could think of it like a garden hose. A garden hose spits out water, while an image hose can spit out flowers or rocks or birds. This is a brush that spits out birds. I'm going to make them smaller here, and I'm just going to click with my mouse because that works better for this particular brush. And you can see I can make all these little distant birds. If I wanted to, I could even draw with my pen and make a really crazy line of birds here. There's different brushes that do different things. Some of them will spray, some of them will draw in a line, some of them will add color to the birds. These birds are what's known as an image hose nozzle, and a nozzle is basically the contents of the image hose. So I could use these clouds here and paint with clouds. You could paint with boulders. These are all located in the Nozzle libraries, which comes with the workspace included in this class. These are all image hose nozzles that I made myself. I just drew all the little pieces of artwork and built my own brushes. There's a separate video in the class resources that'll teach you how to make your own image hose brushes. Now that we've made some observations and we're familiar with some of the tools that we're going to be using, let's go ahead and move forward to the lesson 1 painting.